Yo, what you saying, my fellow Saiyans? It's your boy, Gohan Solo. Um, yeah, so when the last ban list dropped, I decided to reboot Yu-Gi-Oh! I believe that the game is due one. I think it would be in both Konami's best interest and the player base's best interest. And yeah, I'd understand why others disagree, but I'd implore anyone watching this video to just stick around, indulge me for the duration of this video. If you love Yu-Gi-Oh, then I love Yu-Gi-Oh too. Not only do we have something in common, but I feel that by the end of this video, I might have offered you something unique within our community, because I don't think that anyone else is doing what I'm doing right now as far as this reboot, which I'll get into in this video. This video will be more about why I think Yu-Gi-Oh could do with a reboot, as well as how that might happen, as well as just addressing a few initial problems that I think come up when exploring the idea. And from there, I will delve into the reboot in more detail in different videos. They'll be more heavily focused on sort of the card design elements and the creative choices, while this is more just a general overview. So yeah, why is Yu-Gi-Oh due a reboot? I think it depends on your sentiment. Just for a bit of background, I was a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player for a few years. I'm not gonna say several years. For a few, I played competitively. I think from around 2010 to 2014. I quit. I say that in quotations. I quit round when Duelist Advent came out, I think, and I started playing competitively probably in 2010. So I had a good few years. Top nationals once. One of those like frequently day-2ing YCS sort of players. So not a super pro, but I was pretty good at the game. So I would be a competitive player. I would say that there are 4 target demographics if you're Konami, and it's and if I'm appealing to them. So those 4 target demographics would be the casual players / nostalgia players, because I'd say that nostalgia players are just sort of casuals. Then you have the competitive players, you have the collectors, and you have the kids, obviously. So why would a reboot be in Konami's best interest? Well, I would say that for casual players, it gives them an entry point into competitive play, or just the game in general, and for nostalgia players, it gives them an entry point as well. So having, like I have friends who are casual players. These people weren't part of the Yu-Gi-Oh community. They were just people who enjoyed playing Yu-Gi-Oh, enjoyed the early anime. So these would be like guys who I met, university, or just randomly sometimes. They're like, yeah, of course I've been to Yu-Gi-Oh, man, and they love their blue eyes, their Dark Magician, their red eyes. Now, they're not really able to enter the competitive scene without, spending a bunch of money and a bunch of time learning everything. There's a huge barrier to entry when it comes to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, which is fair enough, because the game's been going on for a long time. And naturally, the longer things go on, the higher the barrier to entry will be. So by rebooting it, you do allow those casual players who do just want to play their blue eyes, their red eyes, their Dark Magicians, etc., to be able to come back into the game and maybe explore it in a competitive element. But from Konami's perspective, I don't think they really are too fussed whether you're a casual or a competitive, but they would be buying the products because they would want their brand new rebooted versions of their favorite cards. Exactly the same with the nostalgia players as well. You've got those die-hard fans who'll only play, their Dark Magician, their Blue Eyes decks in the competitive scene, even if that inhibits their competitive potential, I guess. So by rebooting the game, it gives them an entry point as well. So it means money for Konami. For competitive players, from what I've observed, many of them have left and entered other games. That's not to say that everyone has, and the game is still very much thriving. We still have very high YCS turnouts. So this isn't to say that the game is dying. I'm not of the belief that the game is dying. However, I have observed that many players have left to go to other games, and in the case of games like say the Dragon Ball Super card game, and because this is on my Gohan solo channel, I'll say that I'm not too into the Dragon Ball Super card game anymore, so I didn't do too many videos on it. I enjoyed it in its initial phase. I think it's gone a little bit hectic. It got very full on very quickly. The power creep was real with that game. But having spoken to everyone who played it, you know, like most of them were the same people who I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh with, who are just disillusioned with modern Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess, and having dabbled a bit in the rebooted Cardfight Vanguard as well, which plays heavily into this idea of the Yu-Gi-Oh reboot. To be honest, they were a huge source of inspiration. Found with them as well that a lot of them were former Yu-Gi-Oh players who weren't really into the game as it is now. And there's always been that. If you're you know, if you're a part of the Yu-Gi-Oh community, you'll know that from day there'd always be people who are naysayers who left the game, and it's like, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh sucks. It's not how it was back in the day. And again, I'm not necessarily arguing that, but I think that a lot of the competitive player base, or the inactive competitive player base, I should say, do feel that way. So if you were to do a reboot, you would not only entice the active competitive players who would obviously want to continue playing their game, and I'll get a bit more into how that would work later. It's fairly conventional. You just have a standard and a premium format. But the players who left the game to maybe play other games would definitely revisit a rebooted Yu-Gi-Oh set in the original era. So again, more money for Konami. Then for collectors, I think that a reboot would be insane for collectors. Collectors would maybe be the happiest out of all the demographics. And again, I'll get a bit more into how exactly I would tailor the sets for collectors. Well, not tailor them, but just provide things for them. Again, Cardfight Vanguard is a really good example of that. But yeah, just by having things in the set that have appreciating values, the collectors would have clear incentives to purchase the reboot sets. Again, more money for Konami. And then finally the kids. I think that the kids are the easiest to cater to because they're pretty much enamored with whatever you put in front of them. Saying that as a kid, well, not as a kid, but as a man who remembers being a kid, and just thinking, you know, 95% of the things that were put in front of me were pretty cool. So really what I mean by that is that whether you're in a different era of Yu-Gi-Oh, or you go back to the original, I think that kids will be into it either way. However, a return to the original era would definitely excite the children who appreciate the history of the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. I guess an example might be that if you're a kid who's a Power Rangers fan, you might know who Tommy is, and you know, the originals, all them, man. It would be the same as far as going back to the Yu-Gi era. You know, even if you're in the Link era, you probably know who Yu-Gi is, etc. So I think that the reboot would appeal to them as well, and their parents' wallets, which is exactly what Konami wants. So the summary as far as the why is essentially just that Konami stands to make a lot of money by returning to the original era, which, as we know, is their primary prerogative. I think that it suits the players as well. Suits casual players, suits competitive players, suits collectors, and it suits the young kids who frankly would probably appreciate a return to a more simplistic game. Now, my reboot isn't as simple as the original one, which I'll get onto in a bit, but it would suit all parties. I think it would be mutually beneficial for everyone. However, there are problems with returning to the original era. Namely, firstly, the original cards were trash, absolute trash. Let me see if I've got. I don't think I have my Legend of Blue Eyes like original decks in this format. But yeah, the original cards were just trash. Let's just get some random list up. This is what we would do. We would use the original cards as proxies and then have the effects on the sides. But you know, everything. This is proxy for our Dark Magician as well. So everything is vanilla. Everything was a vanilla. So the original cards were trash. There was no incentive to play your favorite cards. If you're going to tribute 2 to someone of blue eyes only for it to fall into a trap hole, what's the point? You're not going to do it, and that's not what we want. We want people to be able to play their blue eyes and their favorite cards. Also, the spells were too powerful, or I guess more accurately, too imbalanced. There were cards that were insane, and you know, you had Dark Hole, Reborn, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, Change of Heart, ridiculously powerful cards with no restrictions on them at all, and of course you had other cards that were completely useless. And another problem with the idea of a reboot would be the question of does it devalue existing players' cards, and that can be applied both to the competitive player base and the collector's player base. So the original cards were trash, powerful spells, and does it devalue existing players' cards? So with all this in mind, as a thought experiment, I set out to approach a hypothetical Yu-Gi-Oh! Reboot and to address these problems. Again, this sort of happened around the time of the last ban list. You know, I wasn't planning anything too grandiose with it. I've always been interested in game design. Me and my teammates have always wanted to design games. So I thought this would be an interesting exercise to see if we can make a game or do the Yu-Gi-Oh! Reboot in such a way that still captured the spirit of the game while also improving on those initial problems. So yeah, before I discuss how I would address these problems, I'll just show you how you can look into my reboot if you're not interested in the how and why and just want to get straight to it. So originally, yeah, as you can see here, we would be playing using proxies for our versions of the cards, and then we'd have the effects written on the side in an email. However, the recently added custom cards feature on DN has changed the game entirely. Honestly, it's so sick for us. And yeah, so with that, because now I can not only just design the cards for my own posterity, but everyone can see them as well. Anyone who fancies playing is sick. So for those of you who don't know, if you want to look up custom cards, if you hover around where search is, it will say more options. There's a bit that says custom, no custom cards. Obviously I can look at my custom cards, but if you go to all custom cards, it will have all the custom cards. As you can see, there's quite a few. And if you type in a person's username, it will come up with all the publicly shared cards that were designed by that player. So in my case, my username is HarryG07, and got 14 pages so far. So if you look at that, these are oh wow, Arcana Dark Magician and Arcana Dark Magician Gala up. That's interesting. But yeah, you have all the cards that are publicly available that were designed by me. So anyone can do that. You can look it up, just type it in, look at all the cards that I've made, and yeah, that's the reboot. So again, most of my videos will be centered around the card game itself, discussions around design, playing of the game, so on. However, this one is more, I guess, pragmatic in terms of focusing on why a reboot to the original era would be in all of our best interests, Konami included. So let's go back to the problems aforementioned. So does it devalue the player's cards if we go back to a rebooted format? I would say no. As seen with Card Fight Vanguard, you can make sets in such a way that facilitate collectors and eBayers, mainly referring to the fact that they have alternate artwork versions of the character's signature cards that go for a nice price. 1 in every 6 of their starter decks comes with a special version of the force markers as they have it in that game. It's got a signature on it, and they go for a nice price as well. And then because the older cards are only available in their particular print run, their values appreciate over time as well. So if you think about Yu-Gi-Oh!, Ultimate Rares are probably the best example. Original set Ultimate Rares just constantly appreciate in value. I've been like I've been out of Yu-Gi-Oh! For longer than I've been in Yu-Gi-Oh!, but you know, I've had a binder full of Ultimate Rares for ages, and that's just kept me going. They constantly appreciate over time. If you remember Star Strike Blast as well, infamous set, because it only had the one print run and had so many cards in it that were valuable that the whole set ended up becoming this sort of mythical set. So yeah, the point is that because they only have those one print runs for the older cards, their value will appreciate over time. So in a separate video, once the sets are more refined, I'll discuss how I would plan to release the cards with rarities, artworks, and so on detailed. But even if you imagine that I kept everything the same, just rebooted Legend of Blue Eyes exactly how it is, but you had your Ghost Rare Blue Eyes White Dragon, well, that Ghost Rare Vanilla Blue Eyes White Dragon would still retain its value and would appreciate in value probably just after a year. You know, like you look like 10 years down the line, that Ghost Blue Eyes from Reboot Legend of Blue Eyes would be worth a pretty penny, as can be seen with other Ghost Rares. So pretty much, long story short, I think that no, the collector's value, sorry, the value of the collector's cards wouldn't devalue over time. It would probably cause their existing collection to appreciate in value because they know for a fact that most of their cards aren't going to get reprinted based on the fact that they're after the original block, and even if, you know, they have like their original Legend of Blue Eyes Raigeki or something, that's probably not going to depreciate as well because that's a Legend of Blue Eyes, an original Legend of Blue Eyes Raigeki. So nothing's going to depreciate, and as well as the fact that their cards aren't going to depreciate in value, you offer them a lucrative new market to invest any of their disposable revenue into. So yeah, I think that inherently addresses that problem of does it devalue the player's cards. Then does a reboot make a competitive player's deck obsolete? This is a bit of a more tenuous point, but I would still say no, and the reason for that is that Yu-Gi-Oh's card pool is so large that it's practically infinite, and it's unique in that it hasn't had a rotation structure up until this point. So you know, you can literally play cards from any year of Yu-Gi-Oh! Could have come out years ago. You can still play it. So in this hypothetical reboot, I would have a standard format and a premium format, similar to other games, similar to Cardfight Vanguard, and because there would be a premium ban list, it would keep the format perpetually shifting. There are too many cards, too many archetypes, too many decks for a premium metagame to ever become stagnant. There would be one dominant deck. If it became oppressive, drop a ban list, then another deck would come to take its place. You wouldn't need to keep adding to the power creep, I guess, of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card design. The ban list would almost cause a power de-escalation, wherein you know, you hit the best deck, after a while another deck comes through. Yeah, another thing that would add to the premium meta game as well, the cards introduced in standard now. The thing with the cards that I would be introducing in the standard meta game and the standard sets is that they obviously won't be of the power level of the cards in standard. However, some of them would still be useful either as just little tech options. I'll give do I have my version of White Hole as an example of that? Yeah, so if you see this version of White Hole, then you know, that might have some use in Compet. I've made this version of Ancient Sorcerer as well, just another hand trap, which as you can see by that effect. It's nothing too powerful, particularly in the standard metagame where everything is more simplified, but if this card got released in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, it would be useful. It would probably see play because of the nature of Yu-Gi-Oh! As it is right now. So things such as that would crop up in the premium metagame. They would be relevant, and even just better versions of your original cards, because they do have the name of the cards. Then you know, so as you can see, this isn't a vanilla, which means that it's probably better than the original. Blue Eyes is actually the one exception where I would say that in a premium meta, people might still play the vanilla version because it synergizes with other cards. But certainly in the case of something like this Dark Magician, I designed it in such a way that it would be that it would be good in premium. It's good in standard as well. I had to do it as a trap for programming reasons on DN as well. I didn't intend to make it a trap. I intended to make it like an artifact sort of thing, where if it died in their turn, it would come out. But yeah, that requires special programming on DN, which we can quite do. But yeah, so the point is that with a premium meta, the meta would fluctuate. If you're an existing, if you're an active competitive player and this reboot were announced, well, you would know that you already have the best decks in that metagame. The only fluctuations would be either through ban lists or through cards introduced in standard. And generally, the cards introduced in standard won't power creep the premium cards. Now, if ever they were to, because some of the cards that I've made are very good, so if that crept into the standard meta, then it's no different from regular Yu-Gi-Oh! Where, you know, you would get a new deck that beats the old deck because that's the business model. But it probably won't be so exaggerated as that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Does go through periods where, you know, there'll be one best deck, it will be about for maybe like 6 months, then they'll release a better deck. You won't really be getting too much of that in the standard one, but you would get fluctuations through the ban list and through cards introduced in standard that would be relevant to the premium metagame. So I think that with that in mind, again, you know, does a reboot make a competitive player's deck obsolete? No. If anything, it makes it what's the word? It sort of ensures it, because you don't have to worry about your deck getting power crept out by the next best deck. If your deck is the best deck at the time at which the premium meta is declared, it will be the best deck until a ban list says otherwise, or maybe cards introduced in standard. That would be for me to design, hypothetically. So yeah, now move on to the more pragmatic issues regarding the cards themselves. So having played LOB format or 2002 format, honestly, I can say that it's problematic, to say the least. It's trash. It's trash, man. It's like, oh, so bad. Again, like all your monsters do nothing. Your spells do like everything, and everything just loses to trap holes. There's no point doing anything. Like it was bad. It was really bad. Like me and one of my friends played it way before we had this idea. We were just seeing, you know, like a bit of fun history of the game. Go back to when there was only Legend of Blue Eyes and the Star Decks play, and it was difficult. It was difficult. So yeah, problems again. Firstly, none of the monsters do anything until those that do, which then do too much. I'm talking about things like Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest, introduced in Star Deck Pegasus and Joey, as well as something like Jinzo and Pharaoh's Servant. You know the history of the game. Then before Jinzo, you know, people would play like Summon Skull. So then when Jinzo came out, you only forfeited 100 attack, but in return you had a much better boss monster. So because none of the monsters did anything, it really exaggerated the ones that did. Then secondly, the best spells are too powerful, and thirdly, the signature cards from the anime are useless in the game itself, as I said before. When all the things were vanillas, you just summon it into a trap hole. And this isn't to criticize, you know, the game designers. I understand that in the season 1 of Yu-Gi-Oh, the game worked very differently. It was more like Raijin High almost, for those of you who are familiar with the season 0 anime. It wasn't the game that we know now, but obviously it was very confusing because the way that they promoted the game was as it is in the Battle City and thereafter, and it's confusing when none of your monsters do anything. But yeah, the boss monsters, there was absolutely no reason to play them, which again isn't what we want. So all these three things result in a game that wasn't fun to play in its earliest iteration, and so I sought to solve these problems by firstly making the monsters not terrible, secondly making the boss monsters actually playable, and thirdly making the spells balanced without nerfing them. Because that was the main thing, was like, yeah, obviously I could make Monster Reborn, Graceful Charity, Change of Heart, etc. worse, but those cards sort of have a sentimental sort of legendary feel to them, the same way that that your favorite boss monsters do, and I didn't want to diminish those cards too much. I have nerfed some things, but yeah, I'll get into that. So yeah, beyond that, I also wanted people to be able to play a variety of strategies, because you know, if you're going back to the original format, it's really just you play the strongest vanillas you can, and that's it. And then once the effect monsters come out, it's like, well, you play Witch, you play Sangan, you play the good effect monsters, and that's it. So there was no real synergy between themes, etc. And personally, as a kid, I would always sort of project my own imagination on how the themes worked onto the cards. You know, I always saw the dragons as these mythical rare creatures. I saw the warriors as being these heroic cards, and fiends as being sort of dastardly, tricky cards, etc. So even when the monsters were all vanillas in my own head, I saw ways that they might overlap. Like, as a child, you just sort of imagine that the fire cards will work together. You know, cards of the same attribute will work together, or cards of the same type will work together. And that wasn't actually the case. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a very archetypal game, as all of you would be aware, particularly in its modern iteration. So having seen many examples of this, making the original cards archetypal wasn't too difficult, but the difference is that in doing so, you have a game that, from the beginning, allows people to be expressive in deciding how they want to play the game. So even in just the initial iteration of my reboot, where it's just star deck format, which I'll get onto a little bit, as you can see, there are different decks. You know, you can play like a dragon deck. If you are a dragon guy, you can play a fiend deck if you're a fiend guy, or a more Yami based deck if you're a more Yami based guy. You can play something earth based. You can even just play good stuff cookie cutter deck, which I do appreciate a lot of people want to play. So I really wanted that to be a thing. I wanted people to be able to play different sort of strategies and really experiment that way. And that didn't exist in the 2002 format, where you have no reason to play anything other than the strongest vanillas, because that's all you have to work with. So yeah, with that in mind, I'll go through just how I'd initially handle the reboot, along with just a little sort of preview of the first two starters of my reboot. So the release order would be Star Deck, Kaiba, and Yugi first. Just those two. It would be a preview of Legend of Blue Eyes. So if we go to the initial Star Decks, these are the cards themselves. So this is just card for card as it was in the original Star Deck. This is Star Deck Kaiba. And again, you can look all these cards up. So you can do it by going Harigo 7, but in the case of all the cards I've designed so far, I've put their set numbers on them. So if you want to look them up as particular sets, you can do that. So SDK, is Starter Deck Kaiba. If you type that into the description, so far, for most of them, I'm the only one that you'll find. So all these cards are just my cards from the Starter Deck. So you could look up, you know, all the cards from Starter Deck Kaiba by typing in SDK, and same with Starter Deck Yugi if you do SDY. Same with Legend of Blue Eyes, although Legend of Blue Eyes does have some other cards that aren't mine, but you can tell pretty pretty quickly the ones that aren't mine. They'll be more comical sort of things. I think all of these so far have been mined though, which is pretty good. Yeah, you know, like Metal Raiders, etc. So yeah, have at that if you want. But yeah, so the first release would be Starter Deck Kaiba and Starter Deck Yugi. Got them both there. Although they wouldn't be like this, which I'll get onto in a bit. So I would have 4 to 6 weeks where only two of these, where only these two decks exist in standard. So obviously the premium players would be able to add any of these cards to their premium decks, and then for the standard players, they would have to make the best decks out of you know, whatever you could get by purchasing both of the starter decks. Have that for, again, 4 to 6 weeks. Then you'd release Legend of Blue Eyes. Legend of Blue Eyes. I haven't quite got all of it up yet. I should have it all up by the end of the week for sure. It should only take me probably like 2 or 3 days to get the rest up. But yep, you'd release Legend of Blue Eyes. Then you'd have Starter Deck Kaiba, Starter Deck Yugi, and Legend of Blue Eyes. That format, again, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. Then you'd introduce Starter Deck Joey and Starter Deck Pegasus, again, both of which are uploaded on the site. So you'd have, I'd say, probably 3 to 4 weeks where you have Joey and Pegasus introduced into the Legend of Blue Eyes format. And then after that, you release Metal Raiders. Got 4 pages, that's pretty good. Again, should probably by the end of the week I'll have Metal Raiders up as well. Then after that, again, maybe like 6 to 8 weeks or something in Metal Raiders format. After that, introduce Yugi Evolution. This BLS is clutch, so clutch. Yeah, Starter Deck Yugi and Starter Deck Kaiba Evolution. Just got a couple of them there. Again, 3 to 4 weeks of that before Spell Ruler. I'm not sure I have any Spell Ruler cards up actually. Oh yeah, I do have a few. Cool. Yeah, then you'd introduce Spell Ruler, and after that, I would have a special set because Pharaoh's Servant introduces some cards from the end of Duelist Kingdom, but also from the start of the Battle City. So I'd have a sort of in-between set just to sort of bridge the gap and deal with filler and stuff like that. And in that special set, I would introduce an alternate format, which I'll discuss in a later video once things are more mapped out, but sort of previews. The idea being to use the Deck Master theme from filler episodes of the anime and turn it into a Planeswalker sort of thing. I'm using pendulums just to demonstrate that for now. But I would have that. I've designed a set for the filler episodes after Duelist Kingdom where they go to the video game world, because in the actual anime it's just like no, my Blue Eyes is stronger than the 2-headed King Rex that's floating around. Wow, sick. So I wanted to do something a bit more interesting with it. So this would introduce its own unique format. You could play it at side events. I don't think there would be main events, but it'd be similar to what they did with Battle Pack and stuff like that. Yu-Gi-Oh has done it before. And then after the special set, again, have however long you want with that. And the special set wouldn't just have you know, the the Planeswalkers or the Deck Masters. It'd have other stuff as well. So it's like your boy Dragon Master Knight, because that first appeared in that filler season actually. So yeah, and this version of Dragon Master Knight is insane. Might be too strong, but we'll see. And then after that, we've got Pharaoh Servant. So far, I don't have much for Pharaoh Servant. But yeah, so that would be my plan. I guess that'll cover the first season, so to speak. And my reboot is currently only dealing with the first season, but I do plan to expand into the second. I've made you know, I've made like the Egyptian gods, and let's see if I type in season 2, what will it come up with? Mostly my stuff, which is pretty cool. I guess I'll give. I've already shown the Arcana Dark Magician Girl. Get regular Dark Magician Girl as a little preview, and this as a preview for the other ones. Why not? Give the god cards their own little weird rota. Not quite rota, but a weird rota. Yeah, I am planning to delve into season 2. Could even do all of it for all I know, but we'll have to see. For now, like, the initial plan was just to do up to Pharaoh Servant, and then I'm gonna see how I feel about after Pharaoh Servant. But yeah, as you can see, with the release structure, things are becoming thick and fast. If that period of releases covered a year, then now would be a very a very good year for Konami. I think that they would see record sales, people would be really interested, and I think that, well, we'll talk about the design aspects later, but I think that the game that I've made is very enjoyable as well. The spaces between the starters and the main sets allow the starters to preview the future sets, as well as offer a unique meta where the starters provide exclusive cards. So for example, with like starter deck Joey and stuff like that, Baby Dragon is really good in the Legend of Blue Eyes meta. It's a super solid card. It is a super solid card in general, as the game is at that point in the game. But then when you introduce Metal Raiders, it's not so OP. And I'd say same things with like Star Deck Kaiba and Star Deck Yugi format, where some things are really powerful, but then once the Legend of Blue Eyes is released, things become somewhat power crept. So currently I've designed all of Legend of Blue Eyes, all of Metal Raiders, the first 4-star decks, most of Spell Ruler, most of Pharaoh Servant, and then just a bunch of other things outside of that. Like I go through, you know, like looking at cards that are OCG exclusive, like so Ancient Sorcerer was an OCG exclusive, or it is an OCG exclusive, but my version is obviously bringing that into the TCG, and there's other stuff. So yeah, just a bunch of things. I've designed a bunch of things. I'm in the process of uploading Legend of Blue Eyes and Metal Raiders right now. Again, I've uploaded the first 4-star decks, so you can have a look at them if you want. And right now, we're just making changes as we go along. It isn't too set in stone. This is sort of an early testing phase for us. We are enjoying being able to go through things and change them, so I will be doing videos just discussing changes as I go through them. Probably just like a weekly patch sort of list where I go through all the changes that I made, because I do like to make changes quite regularly at this stage of the game. But hopefully it would get to the stage where once things are more refined, we can just leave it there and only patch things when they really need to be patched. But you know, we would have a ban list as well, and again, we are treating it as if it were a real reboot. So yeah, I'm going to do a more in-depth video discussing the Yugi and Kaiba star decks, mainly just discussing the designs card by card, as well as the overall structure of the decks, and just some philosophy, I guess, behind what I wanted to do with it. Like, I wanted the Kaiba deck to emphasize his preoccupation with power, and Yugi's to more accurately represent his preoccupation with strategy. And I think that we have done that. But however, I'll give you a little brief preview here. So as you've seen with these two, they are card for card redesigns of the original star decks. With the powerful spells, what I did was had you can only activate one per duel on some of them. This essentially limits them, but doesn't limit them, because you can choose to play 3 of them if you particularly need one of them. say card destruction in particular. You know, you can play 3 of that if it's the sort of deck where you need to be playing 3 of that. It also stops them being abused by things that add spells from the grave back to the hand. So you can have more cards like Magician of Faith, or it stops Magician of Faith from being as powerful as the thing that it can get, because you can only use 1 per duel. With the originals, gave them, you know, stronger effects. I actually made them relevant. I'll discuss them more in the in-depth video. And none of the monsters are useless now. they're all at least pretty good. So yeah, originally it was this. Then we were testing just these 2 decks against each other. We knew it would be trash, and to no one's surprise, it was trash. Now, these original decks had 50 cards each, so it's like, what do you do? Do you cut things? And the way that we sort of addressed that was by introducing a side. So, as you can see, it's a 40 card main deck. This is the 2.0 star deck Kaiba. And all of the cards in this deck and in Yugi's deck are the original 50 and 50 that you saw. So you know, there are a couple things that are interchanged. You don't have I don't think you have Castle Walls in both decks. I don't think you have 2-pronged in both decks. I don't think you have D-Spell in both decks. But between both decks, you have all the cards that were originally released, except with these versions. Obviously, they're more synergistically focused. In Kaiba's deck, you've got 3 Komori Dragon and 3 Mystic Clown, which are more aggressive floaters, and in Yugi's deck, you've got 3 Giant Soldier and 3 Magical Ghost, which are more synergy-based cards, I guess. And you've got a side for every one of them, because, you know, the problem with the decks when they're like this is that some cards just aren't good. But by having them be like this, you can, you know, introduce the idea of side decking to even casual players. It gives them more cards to use, so if a kid wanted to put all 55 into a deck, they could. That would be no problem. But I think it would be a nice thing to include more cards rather than take away cards for the sake of making the deck better. I think you can improve the deck without nerfing things, which is pretty much what we did. The only exception as far as cards that we introduced to the decks that we put in stop defense and block attack respectively, and the reason for those changes was more to do with the starter deck format. So as you can see, as we showed before, we had decks that we built within the starter deck format, and one of the nice things that we found was that cookie-cutter.deck is not the best deck. You actually suffer from not being able to commit to themes more heavily. So basically, Celtic Guardian, Fair Olymp, and Winged Dragon are all Sangans, I guess, for their respective types. The idea being that Celtic Guardian could search Gaia, Feral Imp could search Summon's Skull, and Winged Dragon can search Cursed Dragon. That was a nice bit of theme, I guess. We expected something like this to be the best, and it isn't, which is good. It means that you have to commit to one theme or another. So, you know, as aforementioned, you've got all your different decks there. And we found that we found in recent testing that block attack is a good introduction into the game. It offers something different. Otherwise, it's just a bit reliant on 3 Fisher, and everything's being summoned in attack. It is a bit linear. So by having block attack and to a lesser extent stop defense introduced this early on, it does provide more of a glut of options, which is kind of what we want. There's less than 100 cards in this meta, and yet there's at least 5 playable, like really playable variations of whatever one might interpret the best deck to be. So that's pretty good. I'm really happy with that. But yeah, again, I'll discuss this stuff more in detail later. The point is just to give a preview and you know, if you wanna you know, copy one of the starter decks, you know, like you get one of your friends to load this up and one of your friends to load this up, have some games against each other, please do. It'll make me super happy. You can do it, I guess, original starter deck way if you want to. I wouldn't I wouldn't recommend it, but it would be super scientific. And if you want to take those cards and try and make the best deck that you can out of them, please do. We're ooh, that's not it. Again, like you know, we were good at Yu-Gi-Oh, but we're not perfect at Yu-Gi-Oh, so I'm sure that one of you will be able to come up with a deck that's better than the ones that we're cranking out. But yeah, again, I've put the set numbers on the card, so it should be easy for you to just find everything, and I will be updating them as I go along, be doing videos discussing those updates. But yeah, so anyways, with that, I'll bring this video to a close, and if you've got any questions, let me know. You know, if you fancy playing some games, you can hit me up on DN. Again, my username is HarryG07, so I don't know why typing that came up with those cards. Yeah, just hit me up. You can drop a comment on this video, or you can drop me an email. I'm pretty sure it's gohansolosssj@gmail.com. But if that isn't the case, then I'll add a thing correcting it. I'll put my email in the description if you want to email me. Yeah, if people are interested, you know, I'm happy to set up like a Discord or some other communal means for us to engage. But even if, you know, you just see it and you thought this might be interesting, you want to try it out with a friend or something, please do. Honestly, it'd make me really happy. Like I love Yu-Gi-Oh. I've always loved Yu-Gi-Oh. And as someone who loves Yu-Gi-Oh, I understand that it's a very love-hate relationship. Like we do get shafted a lot of the time. I think that as with a lot of games, Konami's R&D sometimes doesn't understand things from a competitive player base, and you know, personally, I do understand things from a competitive aspect, and I also understand things from a casual aspect. I do have a casual love for the game. So yeah, my aim is to make a game that allows us to have the best of both, really, regarding our love for the anime, our love for the world, our love for the lore, our love for the series, as well as the inherent complexity of the card game, and really trying to maximize that to make the best game we possibly can. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Please, you know, leave comments and like, comment, subscribe if you want. I will be putting up more videos on my Reboot. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you around.